Sándor Petőfi was a Hungarian poet and liberal revolutionary. He is considered Hungary's national poet, and was one of the key figures of the Hungarian Revolution of 1848. He is the author of the Nemzeti, which is said to have inspired the revolution in the Kingdom of Hungary that grew into a war for independence from the Austrian Empire. It is most likely that he died in the Battle of Segesvár, one of the last battles of the war. Early life. Petőfi was born in the early New Year's morning of 1823, in the town of Kiskorose. The population of Kiskorose was predominantly of Slovak origin as a consequence of the Habsburgs' reconstruction policy designed to settle, where possible, non-Hungarians in areas devastated during the Turkish Wars. His birth certificate in Latin gives his name as Alexander Petrovics, where Alexander is the Latin equivalent of the Hungarian Sándor. His father, István Petrovics, was a village butcher, innkeeper, and he was a second-generation Serbo-Slovak immigrant to the Great Hungarian Plain. Maria Hruz, Petőfi's mother, was a servant and laundress before her marriage. She was of Slovak descent and spoke Hungarian with something of an accent. Petőfi's parents first met in Maglod, married in Azod, and the family moved to Kiskorose a year before the birth of the poet. The family lived for some time in Zárbad Shalos, where his father owned a slaughterhouse. Within 2 years, the family moved to Kiskunfélagyi, and Petőfi always viewed the city as his true home. His father tried to give his son the best possible education and sent him to a lyceum, but when Sándor was 15, the family went through a financially difficult period due to the Danube floods of 1838 and the bankruptcy of a relative. Sándor had to leave the lyceum which he was attending in Selmecbánya. He held small jobs in various theatres in Pest, worked as a teacher in Ostfjärdsonyfa, and was a soldier in Sopron. After a restless period of travelling, Petőfi attended college at Bapar, where he met Mordecai. A year later, in 1842, his poem Aborizo was first published in Athenaeum under the name Sándor Petrovics. On the 3rd of November the same year, he published the poem under the surname Petőfi for the first time. Petőfi was more interested in the theatre. In 1842, he joined a travelling theatre, but had to leave it to earn money. He wrote for a newspaper, but could not make enough money. Malnourished and sick, he went to Debrecen, where his friends helped him get back on his feet. In 1844 he walked from Debrecen to Pest to find a publisher for his poems, and he succeeded. His poems were becoming increasingly popular. He relied on folkloric elements and popular, traditional song-like verses. Among his longer works is the epic John the Valiant. The poem is a fairy tale notable for its length, 370 quatrains divided into 27 chapters, and for its clever wordplay. It has gained immense popularity in Hungary. However, he felt influenced by his editor, Imre Vahot, to continue writing folklore-style poems, while he wanted to use his Western-oriented education and write about growing revolutionary passions, marriage and family. In 1846, he met Julius's entry in Transylvania. They married the next year, despite the opposition of her father, and spent the honeymoon at the castle of Count Sándor Teleki, the only aristocrat among Petőfi's friends. Their only son Zoltán was born on the 15th of December 1848. Political career. Petőfi became more possessed by thoughts of a global revolution. He and Julia moved to Pest, where he joined a group of like-minded students and intellectuals who regularly met at Café Pilvax. They worked on promoting Hungarian as the language of literature and theatre, formerly based on German. The first permanent Hungarian theatre, which later became the National Theatre, was opened in that time. The Hungarian Revolution of 1848. Among the various young leaders of the revolution, called Marcia Ifjak, Petőfi was the key in starting the revolution in Pest. He was co-author and author, respectively, of the two most important written documents, the 12-Pont and the Nemzeti, his revolutionary poem. When the news of the revolution in Vienna reached them on the 15th, Petőfi and his friends decided to change the date of the National Assembly for the 19th of March to the 15th. On the morning of the 15th, Petőfi and the revolutionaries began to march around the city of Pest, reading his poem and the 12 points to the growing crowd, which attracted thousands. Visiting printers, they declared an end to censorship and printed the poem and 12 points. Crowds forced the mayor to sign the 12 points, and later held a mass demonstration in front of the newly built National Museum, then crossed to Buda on the other bank of the Danube. When the crowd rallied in front of the Imperial Governing Council, the representatives of Emperor Ferdinand felt they had to sign the 12 points. As one of the points was freedom for political prisoners, the crowd moved to greet the newly freed revolutionary poet Máté Tankcsix. Petőfi's popularity waned as the memory of the glorious day faded, and the revolution went the way of high politics. To the leadership of the nobles, those in the noblemen's assembly in Poznań had been pushing for slower reforms at the same time, which they delivered to the emperor on the 13th. But events had overtaken them briefly. Petőfi disagreed with the assembly and criticized the view of the goals and methods of the revolution. In the general election, Petőfi ran in his native area, but did not win a seat. At this time, he wrote his most serious poem, Arizona Apostol. It was an epic about a fictional revolutionary who, after much suffering, attempts, but fails, to assassinate a fictitious king. Petőfi joined the Hungarian Revolutionary Army and fought under the Polish liberal General József Bem in the Transylvanian Army. The army was initially successful against Habsburg troops, but after Tsar Nicholas I of Russia intervened to support the Habsburgs, they were defeated. Petőfi was last seen alive in the Battle of Segesvár on the 31st of July 1849. Death. Petőfi is believed to have been killed in action during the Battle of Segesvár by the Imperial Russian Army. A Russian military doctor recorded an account of Petőfi's death in his diary. His body was never officially found. Rumors of Petőfi's survival persisted. In his autobiographical Roman Clef Political Fashions, Morjokai imagined his late friend's resurrection. In the novel, Petőfi returns 10 years later as a shabby, déclassé figure who has lost his faith in everything, including poetry, though for many years his death at Segesvár had been assumed. In the late 1980s, Soviet investigators found archives that revealed that after the battle about 1,800 Hungarian prisoners of war were marched to Siberia. Alternative theories suggest that he was one of them and died of tuberculosis in 1856. In 1990, an expedition was organized to Bargazin, Siberia, where archaeologists claimed to have unearthed Petőfi's skeleton. Poetry. Petőfi started his career as a poet with popular situation songs, a genre to which his first published poem A Borozo belongs. It is the song of a drinker praising the healing power of wine to drive away all troubles. This kind of pseudo-folk song was not unusual in Hungarian poetry of the 1840s, but Petőfi soon developed an original and fresh voice which made him stand out. He wrote many folk song-like poems on the subjects of wine, love, romantic robbers, etc. Many of these early poems have become classics, for example the love poem Avaragnak meg tiltan in Emlet, or Before Altamakoni Hara, which uses the ancient metaphor of love and fire in a playful and somewhat provocative way. The influence of folk poetry and 19th-century populism is very significant in Petőfi's work, but other influences are also present. Petőfi drew on sources such as topoi of contemporary almanac poetry in an inventive way, and was familiar with the works of major literary figures of his day, including Percy Bysshe Shelley, Pierre-Jean de Béranger, and Heinrich Heine. Petőfi's early poetry was often interpreted as some kind of role-playing, due to the broad range of situations and voices he created and used. Recent interpretations, however, call attention to the fact that in some sense all lyrical poetry can be understood as role-playing, which makes the category of role poems superfluous. While using a variety of voices, Petőfi created a well-formed persona for himself, a jaunty, stubborn loner who loves wine, hates all kinds of limits and boundaries, and is passionate in all he feels. In poems such as Jovendles he imagines himself as someone who will die young after doing great things. This motif recurs in the revolutionary poetry of his later years. The influence of contemporary almanac poetry can be best seen in the poem cycle Cypros Lombok Etelka Surgera. These sentimental poems, which are about death, grief, love, memory and loneliness, were written after a love interest of Petőfi's, Etelka Csapo, died. In the years 1844 to 45, Petőfi's poetry became more and more subtle and mature. New subjects appeared, such as landscape. His most influential landscape poem is Arizona Orthold, in which he says that his homeland, the Hungarian plains, are more beautiful and much dearer than the Carpathian mountains. It was to become the foundation of a long-lived fashion, that of the plains as the typical Hungarian landscape. Petőfi's poetic skills solidified and broadened. He became a master of using different kinds of voices. For example, his poem Aia Acute Gi. Joe Jadani imitates the style of Joseph Jadani, a Hungarian poet who lived at the end of the 18th century. It is interesting to note that several of Petőfi's poems were set to music by the young Friedrich Nietzsche, who composed as a hobby while studying classics at Forte before beginning his career in philosophy. Petőfi maintained a lifelong friendship with János Ároni, another significant poet of the time. Ároni was the godfather of Petőfi's son Zoltán. Honors and memorials. After the revolution was crushed, Petőfi's writing became immensely popular, while his rebelliousness served as a role model ever since for Hungarian revolutionaries and would-be revolutionaries of every political color. Hungarian composer and contemporary Franz Liszt composed the piano piece Demandenken Petőfi's in his honor. Liszt has also set several of Petőfi's poems to music. In 1911, a statue of Sándor Petőfi was erected in the traditional Hungarian capital of Pressburg on the main square. In 1918, after the army of the newly independent First Czechoslovak Republic occupied the city, the statue was dynamited. After the sculpture was boarded overground temporarily until its removal and replaced with the statue of Slovak poet Pavol Orsavjezdislav. Today, there is a statue of Petőfi in the Medic Garden. During the late 1940s, Boris Pasternak produced acclaimed translations of Petőfi's poems into the Russian language. Today, streets and squares are named after him throughout Hungary and Hungarian-speaking regions of neighboring states. In Budapest alone, There are 11 Petőfi streets and 4 Petőfi squares. See public place names of Budapest. A national radio station, a bridge in Budapest, and a street in Sofia, Bulgaria also bear his name, as well as the asteroid 4483 Petőfi, a member of the Hungarian family. Petőfi has a larger-than-life terracotta statue near the Pest end of Urtsi-Szabay Bridge, sculpted by Miklós Zso and Adolf Azar. Similar Petőfi statues were established in many other cities, as well, during the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. Hugo Meltzel was who made well known the works of Sándor Petőfi in abroad.